Hello and welcome to the lecture. So let's continue with the more customizations on the interactive grid. So now we'll focus on the data input part, like adding the validations here, our client-side validations. Even though I would recommend going with the server-side validations, which we can see here at the page processing, but there is a good to use the client-side validations for a user-friendly experience. You have to handle the both cases, and even the client-side validations will be very much friendly to the user to understand and correct the messages as soon as possible, instead of depending on the save button when the user is editing a lot of records. So that's the main thing, right? So to show the client-side validations. And Oracle APIs also has inbuilt validations, as when you click on the edit button, you can see on the grid headers we have a red triangle at the corner in these two fields and not here, meaning that these two columns are mandatory. And if we gonna clear these fields and tab out, it will be showing a red flag, right? So this highlight shows me that this is mandatory field. And even if we clear here, the same result will be seen, meaning that this field is mandatory. So this is about the Oracle APIs. And even now if we try to revert the changes, if I refresh row, maybe I'll refresh the page again. So if I gonna be editing this to a number, this is a number field, right? Store ID is a number field under this grid, as you can see. So if I try to save it, this is not handled at the client side, but this will be handled at the server side, because this is with respect to Oracle data type check. So that's also be triggered from the backend. So these are inbuilt validations showing me that this field is numeric, and even for a date field, when you're entering other than the date format, it will be showing that as well. But we need to add some our own validations depending on the business cases we want to design a friendly application. So we'll be adding a client-side validations now. So there are two ways of adding the validations to the interactive grid. One is through the HTML way, that can be achieved through the JavaScript or the AJAX APIs, and the other is through the model object way, which we are seeing in the apex.region. Call get views grid.model. From that also you can use it, but there are limitations to both. It's not a perfect way of showing the validations. There are limitations, but still you can add some meaningful experience to the user. So we'll start with the HTML validations. And so if we'll go to the the console, for that we have to assign a static ID to the fields which we are gonna set. So what I'm gonna add the validation is, so if the store ID is less than 1, because it accepts the -1, right? So if I put -1 and save, it will be saved. And it's showing some backend error, I guess maybe it didn't save. Okay, but it's fine because it's having some exception over in the backend. It's not showing, but we can show it in the client side to to stop it. So that would be a better way to do that in the client side level. So we will create one dynamic action on the change of the store ID. So I'm going to create this dynamic action, and let me put this to store ID validate, and this would be on the change. And this happens when the client side add that we can put it only on null. So item or column is not null, and then only this would be executing. And our logic is on the JavaScript side. So before that we have to create the static ID for this field, which you need to be creating the same for the region which we seen earlier, and the same for the column. So if I go to the column on the column tab, here in the advanced we have the static id. So let us make the static id as s underscore. We are gonna follow the naming convention. It's not static, it's store, and it's store id because the name is the store id. So I'm gonna differentiate with s underscore static id. And in the execute JavaScript code, for now we will just understand some change event. We'll just put console.log apex dot, maybe we'll put this for some understanding. So we will see that we are not going to use this, just for a brief change. So now if we're gonna see that whenever I'm gonna change this store id to some name, and this is seen, okay, this is triggered from the primary key trigger. So from the Oracle Apex it's triggered, need not worry about that. And yeah, so that's fine. So we'll just put some other entry like, so now this is popped up, and this has the same as the developer console. So nothing much, we can get some information as we saw, and we are gonna focus on using the AJAX API, which is apex.item, that will be on this column. So what we have given as the static id over here. So I'm gonna copy this static id and we will type the console. So there are two ways actually. So apex.item will focus because that's the preferred way. And now if I paste it, so this will return me that column data. So this is a field, right? So field is having a lot of rows, so I'm not sure which it is giving. So if I put dot get value, means which it is returning, means it's on the highlighted input cell, so means that it's on the input, right? So now if we focus it or in the edit mode, it HTML is like it's an input element. We are going to use the static id and it will get that. So if I now focus here and gonna use the same command, it gives me 4 because this is on the active cell. So this is about the apex.item of column static id dot get value. So we have seen earlier on the page item that will be resulting as the same, because page item is unique and only a single thing can be differentiated, but this is a set of rows in that field, right? So s underscore store id will have different values based on the user selection. So this is about that. And so we will gonna be creating validation now. So instead of using the get value, we will use a thing that is on this API, that is node. So this returns me the HTML as same as document.get element by id. So if we gonna go to document.get element by id of that column name, so it's gonna return me the same. So it's almost the same, right? Not almost, it's exactly the same. So it using the node on the apex.item, we can perform any JavaScript functions actually. So even we can put dot value, it will return the same. So it's like document.element get by id dot value, it's the same. This also the same. Instead of get value, I'm using node dot value, it works the same. So we are gonna use the another function that's from the document.get element by id. So that is the set custom validity. So if I put set custom validity here, and this will accept an input, that is the parameter, that is the message. So set custom validity, so this will set an error on the selected id which we are querying. So if I put some like, this would be returning me that message now. So it's not showing here, so only it happens when we focus it. So if I focus on this value and tab out, it's showing me that, and we can see the message down that what we entered is seen, please enter positive number. So if I go out, it's gone. So this is about the message setting from the JavaScript, and that's through the AJAX API. Even it works on the document.getElementById. So if I'm gonna refresh here and let me replace this thing to document.getElementById. So just for understanding, this document.getElementById, now it's done. So if I focus in, it's coming here. Okay, so that's about that. And before that, the limitation is already shown here for me to explain. So what that is, whenever we are gonna set the custom validity, right, and we are gonna hover over the next row, this is a limitation on this, setting the custom validity. So it's automatically coming every time whenever we focus, because that instance is initiated to this input field. So meaning that we are setting this document.getElementById or the apex.item. This is setting through the column level, and it's activating whenever the user is focusing. So whenever we are focusing, this is activating. So if you want to clear this, we can do that using the same thing, but we have to enter a null message. So now if I gonna go to 13, if I come out of 14, and if I go to 15, it will be highlighted, right, and 16, and so if you want to stop this highlighting thing, and if you want to clear that message, we have to clear the errors using a null message over there, the same command. So if I clear that, and now if I go to 17, 18, it's gone. But the old ones won't go, because that's already having an error class added, so it won't go. But with the other fields we can avoid. But this is basically, we can't add every instance to focus and check for this validations or something, right? So this is a bit limitation, but still it's somewhat better in the other case, which I would tell. And we can still use some more logic to clear this validity. There are ways to do that, and if we focus on this here, we can stop it. So basically we have to trigger the change event again. So what that means is, so we can trigger, and then whenever we are in this cell, we can use $of trigger change. So this is on the change event, right? So $of. So if I'm in this cell, I can clear that using $of hash dot trigger change. So this will clear that, means it's triggering explicitly. It's like apex.event.trigger. So this is about calling that specific dynamic action with respect to change. So this is a way, but still it's a bit, writing more logic there. Okay, so this is about the one way of adding the custom validity, that's the validations through HTML and the JavaScript combined. So we are going to use the AJAX API and the document.getElementById, both works fine. So it's about that. So now the next way is through the model, which one I was telling. So it adds only at the record level. We need not worry about this, but there will be a limitation which I'll be telling that also. But this somewhat, in a way it's better, in other way that's better. So it's about some result. So we will create the event on the edit initialize. Means whenever this cell is in edit mode, we have to get the record ID. So we have to use that event to use this model API. So basically it works through a simple way. Maybe you can start with the console, then we can implement in the Apex side if needed. So it's about setting the customized one. So if I gonna put this with the logic here, maybe we can add this our previous implementation first, then we'll be coming back here because we have created this for our purpose, right? So let's add our logic to the first one. So apex dot item of s underscore store id dot get value is less than 0, then we will gonna be adding that, which we are gonna set. We'll put the AJAX API, copying it and pasting here, and we'll add a else case as well, and this would be setting the null. So it's about that. Even in this works on the form elements, but that is somewhat a bit way to show it, the error. So we'll cover that in a few lectures for the form validations at the client side. And now we will be seeing that message. Now if I gonna put through the -1, okay, we have an error in the name. Yeah, it's having apex.item here. The name should be correct whenever we are gonna use the objects, so it will be a big problem. So I'll put -1 now, and okay, I think there's an error again we might have missed here. So okay, I didn't put the function here, and now if I put -1, it's coming fine. So it's showing me that please enter a positive number. So if I enter the right one, and it's cleared. So this is a way of implementation, but still it has the limitations which I was telling. If I gonna go in every field, it should be coming. And now we will be implementing the model way. So we are gonna start by using the console first to understand from the apex.region. So hope you got the region ID from the previous lecture which we have used. So we are gonna start with the apex.region of the static ID of the region, that is interactive grid, s_stores, and now we will be using call function. So that will call me a get views method that is inside this one, and even the grid method. So this will return me the grid object, and here we'll be going to the model. So this is the model now. So here we have one function which is not listed here because there are various functions under the model. So it's about the set validity. So it's set validity. So it has 4 parameters. One is optional and that varies. So the first one is the type of setting. So if it's a error or if it's a valid, so we are gonna show the error, right? So it's the error. And the second one is the ID, primary key, and we are going to get the primary key using the row initialization which I said earlier when we are editing from that. So for now we are hard coding it to 1. We're gonna show it on the store name and the name of the cell. So if we are gonna use the store ID, right, last time we can use store ID as well, but this example I'm gonna use the store name as the primary key is this one. I'm gonna highlight this one here in this hard-coded example. So I will use the field name, and you have to be careful, this is not a static ID, this is the column name. So what is here at the page designer, so at the column name what you have defined. So we have to give that store name here, and the final thing is the optional one, which is with the error it's mandatory, that is the message. So it's like error message is popped. Okay, so this has some problem because I have mistaken the validity again. Yeah, so now it shows me here. So this is pointing me here and with the message what we have used. So this about the model level. So it's very better if I even gonna focus anything, it's not going to show me the highlights which we have seen in the previous implementation. So that's the advantage. And even if you wanna put it to other cell, maybe on the cell number 5, you can add it there as well, because this is ID 5, so this store ID is seen. So it's about that. So the disadvantage is when we are going to focus this, it will be cleared. So we are not sure why it's that, but still it's user won't be coming out sometimes, but it happens. But still it's a bit better than in some ways to the custom validity, and custom validity will stay in that cell itself unless we are gonna clear at the at the HTML level. But this is not that. It's whenever we gonna instantiate, it will be clear. So that's the limitation. So this about that. So we are gonna set it here. So how to clear that? So we have to change a bit. So we have to remove this message and only 3 parameters. So instead of the error, we have to put the string as valid. So if I put valid this way, it's cleared now. So with the valid and the record ID 5 and with the store name column, it's cleared. In the model object, it's just telling to that it's valid. So if it's error, it will tell it's error. That's it. So this is about that. And even whenever we are gonna set through custom validity, or let me go to the previous one, custom validity, right? So when we are gonna set through this custom validity, even when we are gonna save, it's stopped by the Oracle APIs automatically if it is having any error. Even that's the same case with with the model. So if I gonna put the model to this, okay, this is valid, right? So let me put the model to this, and if you're gonna save, it's stopped still. But if I gonna clear, it's not popping. So it's limited to the model side with respect to the validations of the client side. But this can be handled in a more detailed way, but it's not a better practice to add validations. I'm telling it's only on the server side, it's a better side, and it will be more secure to use these server side validations, which makes use of the PL/SQL logic. So this is about the validations in the interactive grid, and we'll see more about the remaining JavaScript interactive grid functions in the next lecture.